Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from Chase Commercial Term Lending and New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Capital One Bank, the Wickoff Group, Greenberg Traurig. Additional funding is provided by grants from AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Colliers International NYC, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, Customers Bank, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Foley & Lardner, Friedman LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, HAP Investment Developers, Herrick Feinstein, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Chairman USRealty.com, John Katsimatides, Red Apple Group, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Madison Realty Capital, Massey-Knackle Realty Services, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, New Banks, MHP Real Estate Services, People's United Bank, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Sterling & Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, The Continuum Company, CUNY TV Foundation, The Moynihan Group, Urban American, and These Friends.
Crosby Street, Broome Street. That's where this kid was born. This kid was born in 1931. This kid goes to school, gets involved with the junk business, becomes a real estate salesman, gets involved with this fledgling political party called the Conservative Movement, goes to Washington, works, for the borough president, works for a congressman, and then in 2001, becomes the 14th borough president of the borough of Staten Island. I'm lucky to have the Honorable James Molinaro, who is also the senior managing director at Pitta, Bishop, Del Giorgio, and Giblin. Because Vinny will never forget if I didn't say that.
Okay.
You were telling me about your father. Your father, we would call, if we had to say, was a playboy?
Well, playboy in the sense that he didn't get married until he was in his 40s, mid-40s.
Right, but he used to come back and forth, you said, from Italy,
yes, right? He would come back and forth with some of his friends and stay here 2 or 3 months, 4 months, then go back.
So where was he from in Italy, your father?
A small little town called Aldaville, which is right off Naples, up in the mountains somewhere.
Right, and your mother?
My mother came from the same town, and he married her. He was in his 40s. I believe she was 19 or 20.
Yeah, you said to me there was like a 23-year
difference.
Yeah,
23-year span between the two.
Right, so when does he come over here to America?
In the 20s, maybe 25, 26. They have one child. His name is Angelo. And they're pregnant with my older sister, Jean. She's pregnant with her, and they come here. So it's in the 20s, in 25, 24.
Your father originally, he worked for the WPA and some public
works?
Yes,
the WPA. He worked in Orchard Beach. He worked up in Orchard Beach creating that. He was very, very proud of it. And would tell his sons. In fact, he took us up there many a time on a weekend. Get on the train, go all the way up there.
And then after that, he was an entrepreneur. He was down in the markets, right?
Yes,
yes. That's what we'd call him, an entrepreneur.
Yes.
What do you do in the markets?
Well, what he'd be down the market, and the dealers would come from the small restaurants and small cafeterias, and they would buy a case of, it could be cantaloupes, a case of onions or whatever. He would deliver it with a push cart. And his route was from where the World Trade Center was, that's where the market was located, up to 14th Street. All kinds of weather. He would deliver it for you. Maybe he'd get a dime for a bushel or a case of whatever.
But it was a nice little part-time business, which,
Well, it's a full-time.
I mean,
business,
you know, a full-time
yeah, right.
business after WPA.
Yeah,
but
after WPA.
It was a good type of situation.
Right.
So how'd they end up on Crosby and Broome Street?
Well, that was a heavily Italian area, and a lot of them were Bisons from the same part of Italy. And there was 4 apartment houses there between Howard South and Bleecker Street North.
And these were 6-story walk-ups, right?
Yeah, walk up, and the only 4 apartment houses in those 4 long blocks, and the rest were all factories. And most of the buildings were what they used to call Bisons. In other words, they came from the same buyers, and they knew
Now,
each other.
did you have any relatives who were living in the building also?
Oh yes. We had not relatives in the sense of cousins or aunt, but they were Bisons. And everybody got called uncle.
Right, because they came from the same town.
Yeah, Uncle Mary, Uncle this, Uncle Charlie. But and the building was very integrated. Also, we had almost every nationality in there.
But you said you loved growing up over in that.
Oh, it was great.
It was a
It was
great
It was great.
environment.
It was great. It was absolutely great.
And you went to public school?
Public School 21, which was on Mott, between Prince and Spring, and it was directly across from St. Patrick's Catholic School, which is was the oldest Catholic school in the United States. In fact, the first Catholic school in the United States. And we did not go there because my father couldn't afford the tuition.
Right, but there was a story about communion you told me about?
Yeah, we would go there every Tuesday. We would leave a half hour early from public school at 2:30, and we would all march over there, and we'd go there for our training for communion and confirmation.
Now, you told me one of your first jobs growing up was the shoe shine kid.
Well, the event that took place that created that was that extra money was difficult, for Dad and Mom, and so the idea was what could I do after school? So me and my friend got this idea, we'd shine shoes. So we got an orange crate, and we made our shoe shine boxes, and Dad purchased the little stand,
the metal stand
to put your foot on. He purchased that. We screwed it in, or we nailed it in, or we call it, and we would shine shoes on Broome and Broadway, where today Bloomingdale is. And I'd be on one corner, he'd be on the other corner, and
what'd you get, a dime?
Nickel. Never got a dime. Was, oh my God, so rare. In fact, I made a commitment to myself that when I grew up, I would never give a kid a nickel. I'd always give him a dime.
Right, so you took care of that.
Yeah.
Now, so later on, when you're in junior high school or something, there's a guy who's in the, what would we call it, junk business? What would we call it?
In those days, they called them junk shops, but he handled just paper, waste paper.
So where was that located?
Well, if you see where the building is, they're about 200 feet going north was the shop. And they would take this paper in, and they would sort it out.
Right. Now, he used to say, kid, pick me up a cup of coffee, give you a couple of nickels. And
no, don't nickels, a couple of pennies, whatever.
And you go for a cup of coffee, you bring it back.
Bring it back.
And then, because he specialized, as you said, in papers,
yeah,
you would go look around to find the joke books, right?
Oh, absolutely, which were very valuable.
The joke books were, definitely, if you would have kept them, they would definitely be valuable. Okay, so you wanted to get the Marvel or the, right?
We used to trade them off, we used to play cards to see who would win it, it was fun. But so that's how I started. So then I started to work there during the summers, all day. I'd be all day in the paper.
One of your relatives said to you, it's a business that's unhealthy for you, right?
Unhealthy for you.
It's unhealthy for you, and it wasn't something good for you.
Right.
Okay. Then, but you're working there one day, and your sister comes, and what happens? She says, your mom.
So his mom died.
And you're about to graduate high school, but this really was a major event in your life.
I was mean. I became very mean. A person you couldn't tolerate. I just couldn't understand. Why would I lose my mother?
Right.
All my friends had mothers. And for about a year and a half, I was really
Right.
tough to deal with.
So you left the junk business at this time, and then how'd you get up into Savoy shoe business?
Well, downstairs, the janitor, what we'd call the building, that maintained the building, his son and daughter worked for a slipper factory, and it was called Savoy Slippers.
Well, I want to go back. You also told me that you maybe used to cut wood.
Well, that was mandatory. That was before my mother died, but because she was the one that.
She was in charge of the heat for the hot water?
She had to make the no. She needed wood for the stove upstairs to cook on in the winter, and
So you cut the wood.
she cut wood and you store it down the cellar. Each tenant had a so-called bin, which was I would guess was about 4 feet wide and about 10 feet long, and,
So you cut the wood so you had.
and you store it there.
Okay, and that was for the cooking.
Well, it was for cooking, for heat. too.
Heating, it was
yeah,
everything.
Cooking, yeah, but there was no heat in the building.
So later on, how'd you end up at Savoy Shoe?
Well, as I was saying, she passed away, and I was unemployed and just hanging around, doing nothing. And I remember the lady's name. Her name was Joanna, in Italian, and her son, which was Norfio, and the daughter, which I believe was Suzanne, I believe. They were working for Savoy Slipper on 4th Street, right off Broadway. And they said, you get a job there. So I went to work there, and I was there for a couple of years.
Now, what happened later on is that you would finally put the soles on the shoes.
That's right. I was a piece worker. You got paid for what you produced. And I worked my way up from sweeping the floor and so forth and so on to the point that someone would put the cement on the shoe, and then there was a rack with about 48 slippers that came over to me with the soles, and I would put the slipper and put the sole in and press the button and come down and press on it.
So after that, how do you get back into what we'd say was the junk business?
Okay, I get back in the junk business because the gentleman that I was working for, his son-in-law, that was married to the daughter, his wife died suddenly. His wife died suddenly. And I knew them very well because the boys were all in the Army. His brother-in-laws were all in the Army, and he ran the shop, because his father-in-law had died. And they basically pushed him out. And he was by himself. And he says, I'm opening up a business. He says, why don't you come with me?
Now, but his business, you joined him like in 1954?
No. It would be 1950, just about 1950, maybe 1949.
Okay, so you joined him then, but he did more than paper.
Yes.
He had metals.
He had metals. He had a shop for metals, and we did a lot of clothing. In fact, we had one floor in the building where we would buy all the leftovers from Goodwill Industries in Roanoke, Virginia, bring them in by car, and then we opened them up the bale and sort them out, take out the good shirts, the good pants, which we exported. We gave it to an exporter. We didn't export it ourselves. And if you had a cotton shirt that was ripped, it would go to a company that made wipers out of them for garages. So nothing was wasted.
Now, and he was like a mentor.
Yes, like a father to me.
Like a father to you, and I mean to the level that you were with him for close to 21 years of your life.
Right.
And he was,
He christened my first kid.
right, and he also, he helped you buy your first house.
Yes, he gave me the opportunity to buy my first house.
You moved to Brooklyn afterwards, right?
When I got married.
Right, you got married.
So
you went to Flatlands.
Flatlands and 46th Street. East 46th Street and Flatlands Avenue. It was a one-family home that was converted into a two-family home. It was a big, big home. And downstairs, obviously, had the living room, had a kitchen, had a couple of bedrooms downstairs. Then they had upstairs, they had 3 bedrooms. So what they did is they made one bedroom, they kept one bedroom a bedroom. The middle bedroom, they made into a kitchen. And the bedroom in the front, they made it into a living room. And we rented it.
And in 1964, he helped you with the down payment
For the house.
to go to Staten
Absolutely.
Island, which at this time, Staten Island was, nobody knew what Staten Island was. I mean, the borough was incorporated in like 1898, but it was, you had to go there by ferry.
That's right.
And that was the people weren't there, and then the bridge was finally opening up in 1964.
Right.
And you moved 1 month before into
Bridge
an attached home.
Yeah, duplex, but they call it duplex,
To,
which I still live in.
so you moved to Staten Island, one of your better investments in
Yes,
your life.
it was a good investment.
It was a great investment over there. So now you said to me it's 1971 and the business is changing. The business is really not doing well. And what do you do at this time?
Well, I have a friend of mine that I know from the Conservative Party that's in the real estate business. That's Master Real Estate. And he asked me to go and work with him. So during this period when business was very bad, but I was still working in the city, I would go on a Saturday and on a Sunday and learn the business. And I had to take a test for my license, real estate license and so forth and so on. And then when the business closed, I went with him full time.
Right, but it was a tough business. You really didn't do well.
Well, if you recall, it was during the time that New York went broke.
Right, so nobody wanted to buy anything.
Nobody could buy anything. Everybody was afraid of buying anything. You could buy a piece of land in, say, Annandale. You could not 100 by 100 for about $6,000. Today, that same piece of land will cost you $250,000. So you weren't able to sell. And the ones that were doing some business were the old timers.
But let's talk about how you got involved with the Conservative Party. You said to me you used to pick up the newspaper, Journal America,
Journal America.
the World, the Journal
America.
America. Growing up as a kid, you didn't have political involvement. How do you get involved with the Conservative Party?
I was always interested in a form of politics. I was always interested in a form of government. And that was the reason why when I became 21 years of age, and I registered blank. I didn't register in the Democratic Party. I didn't register in the Republican Party. Obviously, being on the East Side, everything was Democrat. There was the alderman, then there was the assemblyman, and I was very, very, very friendly with the assemblyman that was there at the time. In fact, he was the gentleman that got me my license plate, JPM 9, which I still have today, believe it or not. And but I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't satisfied, but the idea that people would reward you for doing things that you didn't want to do. If you didn't want to work, they always found an excuse and so forth and so on. Instead of giving you a reason why you should work. And it was a contradiction of what my father was teaching me, or my father taught me. My father, we were on welfare 3 weeks, about 3 weeks. We were on welfare when my father came home and they rushed him to Bellevue Hospital, and he had a rupture, and they operated on him, and we couldn't work. There was no income. There's no income at all, and my mother went on welfare. She cried. I remember her crying. I didn't understand what the crying was about, but I understand the crying. And I remember I used to go to Worcester Street and Prince Street, where the welfare office was, and they would measure me up for pants at that time, and knickers and so forth. And they would give us cans of beef, some kind of beef in the cans. And they would come and check your house. And I remember the one incident. Now, I'm about 12 years old then, 12, 13 years old. And I remember my father's cousin in Boston sent us a little radio, that we could listen to. And I remember very clearly we used to listen to that program with the midnight, the detective program anyway. We listened to
The Shadow.
The Shadow, we listened to it. And the inspector walked in and he saw that radio. He went bananas. He went actually bananas. He did everything but curse at my mother almost.
Right, because you shouldn't have had a radio.
Radio? Where'd you get this radio from? And my sisters, my brothers were much older. They were able to communicate with my cousins up in Boston. They sent down a letter which was certified that they gave it to us and so forth and so on. So we got past that. Then my father went to work right away.
So how do you get involved with the party later on?
Well, at that time, the parties were both who could give more to the people to get the vote, who could steal the vote from that person by giving them give them the parade and so forth and so on. And the writer for the Journal American, I thought maybe you would look it up. It was Stowski or something. He was an arch to the right, and he wrote what was wrong and so forth and so on. And then he said that there's this political party getting started. Political party getting started. Now, I'm married. I've got one child, and you know, I keep talking to my wife about it, so forth and so on. She doesn't know politics from Spain, or who's even interested in. You know, she's home,
Right.
being a housewife, so she's get involved. So I still remain not endorsed, not involved in any party. I go to some club meetings, and I like what I hear, but there's something here which is annoying me. Then I find out it's the John Birch Society. They had infiltrated, and I backed off a little bit, but then I found there were people like Dan Mahoney that started the party who were opposed to the Birch Society, said we got to get rid of them, and we did get rid of them.
You used to smoke, as you said,
Ooh,
and
3 packs a day.
you ended up in the hospital one day.
Yes.
And your wife, you needed her to vote. Tell the story about that.
Well, I got involved. When I got involved in politics, I got involved like everything else I do. I do it 110%. I do it, whether it's shining shoes or you know, or working for Peter. I do it
Right.
fully. I love what I do. I love what I do, and I'm not ashamed of it, to say it. And I got very heavily involved with politics, and I became very, very friendly to John Markey, Senator John Markey. We became very friendly. And in fact, in later years, we both went to Bailey Seaton's Mass on a Sunday morning. And I admired him because I knew how important he was and how dedicated he was and committed he was to the right things in life. He was opposed to the death penalty 110%, and I was on the other side of that issue. But then we would discuss it many, many times. But then in 1968, he decided, I think he was sold a bill of goods by Mayor Lindsay, that Richmond Avenue on Staten Island to Tottenville, which is all vacant and farmland, homes scattered here and there, should be given to a private corporation. It should be urban renewal. What urban? There's no homes. There's nothing named but farms. We were opposed to it. We were opposed to it 110% because we knew what was going to happen. You know, the big boys were going to come in and chop it up and chew it up, and,
Right.
and we were opposed to it. And in fact, what is Great Kills Park today, they were going to pump sand from the water and create a community there of 250,000 people, just there, all high-rises, like they did up in the Bronx. We were opposed to it, so we were on different sides. And they said, no, this is the best thing that could happen to you. He says, you're going to get this, you're going to get sewage, you're going to get that, and get that. And we opposed it. So we decided not to endorse him. And we didn't endorse him, and he went from 85% of the vote when he ran in 1970 against Teddy Pulaski down to about 54, 55% in 72. But John Markey was a very, very, very powerful man in Albany. He was the head of the Finance Committee, and he was very, very good to New York City.
And so what happens later on, there is a congressman by the name of
Molinaro.
Okay, who finds this hardworking, dedicated guy, and you all of a sudden go to you're working, running his office
Right.
in the Staten Island office for him in Washington.
Right.
You go down to Washington over there. After that, you become
He becomes borough president. I become deputy borough president.
And then in 2001,
I decide to run for myself. After 12 years as deputy,
right, and head of the Conservative
head of
Party.
the Conservative Party.
You know, you'll be remembered for some great things that you've done on the island. I mean, you know, economic development. Like right now, we have the Wheel coming to Staten Island. We have the Empire Outlets. You know, we have a lot of good things going on.
The lighthouse.
The
project.
lighthouse development. Then you also have the
Homeport.
The Homeport, which is
Being
850
developed.
homes
Yeah, right.
over there. But you've also been involved with beach, you know,
Renovation.
renovations and some major, you know, the theater. Let's talk about the theater.
Yeah. Okay, we also, remember, we also reopened the container port. which was closed for 13 years, actually closed. The city of New York leased it to the Port Authority, and they closed it. They closed it so they could fill up their ports in Jersey. And they didn't want to open the port. I bought flat paper.
Right, which was the first manufacturing company in 50,
50 years.
50 years to come to New York City.
New York City. And today they have 3 plants there. So
Right, and you also were involved with the zoning, the
rezoning, changing the zoning, because we were
because-
becoming a cookie jar type of community, and I didn't want that. I didn't want a community, and I felt that when a person came out from the city, whether he came from Manhattan or came from the Bronx or came from Brooklyn or Bay Ridge, he wanted a little land in the back of his house for his, for his children to play, and they were built in homes with 4-foot backyards, unbelievable, unconscionable, and that was my biggest battle, and I won that battle. And now you need to have a minimum of 30 feet behind your house.
And, let's talk about the theater. I mean, you had this Art Deco theater built probably in 1935 or so on, which was dilapidated, and, this has become a cultural center.
That's right.
In Staten Island,
That's right.
where you've had Tony Bennett, you've had Bill Cosby, you've had other singers over there,
Smokey Joe,
Right.
whatever.
all of
Right. We've
right,
had a lot
all,
of that.
all of those situations. So hey, since the kid has never been adverse to working hard,
Right.
so another chapter of your career is after you had your 3 terms over as borough president, you get involved with my friend Vinny. So what are you going to be doing with?
Well, Vinny, I'm going to be doing a lot of what I'm doing, the consulting, the advice. I ran numerous campaigns. I ran Senator D'Amato's first campaign when he ran in 1980. I was his co-campaign chairman. And that's a story in itself, how the Conservative Party, he got the Conservative Party endorsement because they wanted to endorse the congressman from Westchester.
What you have always been is, for the people. I mean, you've been working hard, you've been involved with the health, the AIDS program,
right.
the dialysis program on Staten Island. I mean, even though you're a native of Manhattan,
right.
you've spent the last 50 years of your life really building and growing Staten Island.
Well, no question. You have to understand, I love people. I'm a people person. I love people. I love you. I don't care what your religion is, your nationality is. I just love you. You know what I mean? If you're a good person, you're a good person. If you're a bad person, you're bad. Doesn't matter who you are, what you are. And if you could give some help to someone that's has some misfortune, it gives me something. It does something to me inside. It does something to me inside. I'm on numerous boards. I fought to get a nursing home for Bailey Seton Hospital.
I wish I had more time, but I've been fortunate to tell the story about the kid from Broome and Crosby.
Right.
And thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me.